Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something foundational, really, something that underpins entire professions here in Canada. Public trust.
That's right. It's not just a vague idea of goodwill.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about the specific, almost legislated power granted to fields like engineering and geoscience. Why do we let them make decisions that affect us all so profoundly?
It's a huge question. And the answer lies in their core responsibilities, the duties they accept in exchange for that right to practice.
We're going to dig into how they justify and, crucially, uphold that public trust. Because at the end of the day, it's the very cornerstone of their existence as licensed professionals. And look, if you're currently prepping for the National Professional Practice Examination, the NPPE, or maybe you just want to really grasp why professional conduct is so vital, you'll want to stick with us.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to, well, cut through some of the formal language and explain this unique social contract.
Social contract, right?
Yeah. Society grants these professions the right to self-regulate, but it's based on one single, really unwavering promise. The professional's primary duty isn't necessarily to their client or even their employer.
Which might surprise some people.
Right. But the ultimate duty, the paramount one, is always, always to the public good.
Okay, so if you are in that boat prepping for the NPPE or you just find this fascinating, maybe hit that subscribe button now. We'll be covering more on the exam and these essential topics.
Good idea.
So let's unpack this idea, this mandate of trust. Why is it so, well, non-negotiable for engineers and geoscientists specifically? What makes it different?
It really stems from the sheer scale and complexity of the knowledge they work with. Think about it. Complex physics, geology, environmental science, intricate system design.
Stuff the average person, myself included, can't easily verify.
Exactly. When a professional engineer signs off on a bridge design or a geoscientist assesses groundwater contamination, the public is fundamentally trusting their specialized judgment, almost blindly in a way.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
Immense. A mistake isn't just inconvenient, it can be catastrophic. A structural failure, a mismanaged resource leading to environmental damage, a faulty industrial process. The consequences affect lives, health, property, the environment. So that trust can't just be partial, it has to be, well, near absolute.
Okay, so society grants this exclusive right to practice, this kind of monopoly on certain work, but only if that expertise is used responsibly and transparently.
Precisely. It's a conditional privilege.
Who are the stakeholders then? Who does this trust extend to? Is it just the person writing the check?
Oh, definitely not. That's a really critical point the source material emphasizes. The definition of stakeholders is incredibly broad.
Yeah.
Yes, it includes clients and employers.
Sure.
And government regulators, obviously, and the general public who use the infrastructure or live near a project site.
Makes sense.
But here's the unique part. It explicitly includes future generations.
Future generations. How does that work in practice?
Think about decisions made today concerning resource extraction or nuclear waste disposal or even urban planning. Those choices have consequences that ripple forward for decades, maybe centuries.
Right. Affecting people not even born yet.
Exactly. So the professional has this enormous ethical time horizon. They need to consider impacts far beyond the immediate project timeline. This long-term foresight, this stewardship for the future, is actually a core justification for why the profession deserves public trust.
That's fascinating. Okay, so how does this actually get enforced? You mentioned self-regulation. Since the profession essentially polices itself, what are the explicit legal and ethical rules that make this trust concrete? It can't just be based on everyone being individually good.
No, you're absolutely right. It's formalized. Self-regulation isn't just, an internal club agreement. It's actually a delegated legislative authority. Provincial and territorial governments have basically said, okay, professional association, we trust you to uphold these standards on our behalf.
Instead of direct government oversight on every project?
Correct. And this responsibility is baked into law. If you look at the Engineering or Geoscience Acts across Canada, BC, Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia, wherever they are, remarkably consistent on one key point.
Which is?
The professional's primary duty is to safeguard life, health, property, and the environment. That exact phrasing, or something very close to it, appears again. It's the bedrock.
And that consistency is important for something like the NPPE, I imagine.
Absolutely. It shows a unified national standard for public protection, even though licensing is provincial or territorial.
So what happens if a professional fails in that primary duty? Given the high stakes, the consequences must be severe.
They are, and they have to be. Failing that duty isn't just poor practice. It's a violation of both the ethical code and the legal requirements in those acts.
So real teeth behind it.
Definitely. It can lead to disciplinary hearings, significant fines, suspension of their license, or even permanent revocation, losing the right to practice entirely. The whole system of self-regulation hinges on the profession's willingness and ability to enforce these standards rigorously from within.
And the code of ethics adds another layer, the sort of moral compass.
Exactly. The code reinforces the legal stuff, but frames it as a moral imperative. The number one, absolutely non-negotiable commitment in every code of ethics is holding paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public and the protection of the environment.
Paramount meaning it overrides other consideration.
It overrides all others. Loyalty to a client, pressure from an employer, personal financial gain, none of it can take precedence over that primary duty.
What else is core to the code?
Well, alongside paramountcy, there's the duty to act with honesty, impartiality, and fairness. To maintain competence, you have to keep learning throughout your career. And, critically, to avoid conflicts of interest or any deceptive acts that could possibly undermine public confidence.
Okay, this blend of technical skill and moral stewardship seems to be what really defines a professional in this context, distinguishing them from maybe just a highly skilled technician.
That's a great way to put it. You need both. The sources often break this down into two key dimensions of trust: competence and integrity.
All right, let's take competence first, the technical side.
Right. Competence is trust in the delivery. It means stakeholders trust that the work you do is technically sound, it meets all the relevant codes and standards, and it's based on solid, up-to-date scientific principles and sound judgment.
So knowing your stuff.
Knowing your stuff and applying it correctly, but it also includes something called prudence.
Prudence, like being cautious.
Sort of, but it's more active than just caution. Prudence means having foresight, actively anticipating potential risks, understanding the limitations of your own expertise.
Knowing what you don't know.
Exactly. And knowing when to seek advice or bring in other experts. It means only signing off on work you're truly qualified to assess. It's about applying informed technical judgment constantly and consciously.
Can you give an example? Where does a lack of technical prudence become, a real breach of trust?
Okay, think about an engineer designing a chemical processing plant near a residential area. Technical competence means getting the chemical reactions right, sizing the pipes correctly according to standards.
Okay.
Prudence, though, means thinking about the whole system. What happens if there's a power failure? What are the failure modes? What are the potential long-term health impacts of even low-level emissions? Have we considered the full life cycle of the materials used, including disposal?
So looking beyond just the immediate design task.
Yes. A breach of trust occurs if the engineer, say, ignores known potential hazards of a byproduct because addressing it would be expensive, or fails to consult an environmental health expert because they think they know enough. Claiming ignorance of significant hazards later on is just not an acceptable defense. It's a failure of competence and prudence, and thus a breach of trust.
Right. So competence is about the what and the how of the technical work, but you said that's not enough.
Correct. Especially when things get complicated or pressures mount. That's where the second dimension, integrity, comes in.
The ethical side.
Exactly. Integrity is the moral commitment. It's about honesty, impartiality, fairness, transparency, especially when upholding those values conflicts with, say, your company's bottom line, or maybe even your own career advancement.
That sounds like where the real friction happens.
It often is. Integrity demands telling the uncomfortable truth. It means being upfront about project risks or budget constraints that might impact safety, or admitting when the science isn't completely certain, even if your boss or your client doesn't want to hear it.
That must put professionals in incredibly difficult positions sometimes. If integrity means being honest, even when it goes against your employer's interests,
Yeah.
that sounds risky.
It absolutely can be risky, personally and professionally, and the professional has to be prepared for that potential conflict. This is why the ethical codes, and often the law, demand that you refuse to conceal information that could affect public safety.
You can't just stay quiet.
No, you have a positive obligation to act. It means refusing to sign off on designs you know are unsafe, or declining work that would compromise your ethical principles, regardless of the potential fallout. Now, the system tries to offer some protection, like through whistleblower policies within associations or legislation.
But ultimately, it's the individual's call.
At the end of the day, yes, it often comes down to individual ethical courage. And that's tough.
Which brings us back to transparency. Why is being open about the how and the why, the decision-making process, so key to keeping that trust?
Transparency is really fundamental to that social contract we talked about. When professionals clearly explain their reasoning, the data they used, what's known versus what's uncertain or predicted, they're essentially empowering society.
How so?
Well, it shifts the dynamic. Instead of just making decisions for the public in a black box, they're enabling the public, regulators, and other stakeholders to understand the basis for those decisions and make informed choices alongside them. Trying to hide limitations or uncertainties or potential downsides, that's seen as an abuse of specialized knowledge, and it just destroys trust almost instantly.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier these duties are expanding,
Yeah.
particularly concerning the environment.
Yes, this is a huge area now. The environmental dimension is seen as a really critical way professionals justify public trust in the modern era. The source material talks about a cradle-to-grave responsibility.
Cradle to grave, what does that encompass?
It's much more than just, say, meeting minimum pollution standards during construction. It requires a really proactive, systems-thinking approach to sustainability. It means thinking decades ahead, right from the initial concept stage.
So for something like a new mine or a big infrastructure project like a highway,
It means you have to anticipate and plan for the entire life cycle impacts before you even break ground. How will this affect air quality long term? Water tables, soil stability. What's the plan for managing waste generated not just during construction, but during operation and even after decommissioning?
decommissioning too.
Absolutely. Site restoration, potential recycling of materials, that all needs to be part of the upfront plan. And crucially, it means choosing environmentally responsible solutions, factoring in sustainability, even if those solutions might be more costly or take more time initially. It's not just an optional nice to have, it's increasingly seen as a core professional obligation to demonstrate that long-term thinking, especially for those future generations.
That really broadens the scope. It leads into social and cultural context too, right? Trust isn't just about the physical environment anymore.
Not at all. Especially here in Canada, upholding trust increasingly requires real cultural sensitivity and awareness. You can't just impose a technically brilliant solution without considering the human context.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, it means things like properly incorporating Indigenous consultation protocols, understanding the legal duty to consult, yes, but also engaging genuinely to understand cultural values and historical significance tied to land and resources.
Not just checking a box.
Exactly. It's about ensuring project benefits are shared equitably where appropriate, acknowledging potential impacts on traditional ways of life, and frankly, demonstrating humility and respect in dialogues with communities. Understanding that your technical expertise doesn't override local knowledge or cultural importance, this is a huge part of earning credibility today.
Which logically leads to communication. If professionals have all this complex knowledge and are making these broad considerations, how do they actually convey that effectively to build trust, not confusion?
Communication is absolutely key, and it needs to be continuous. It's not a one-off report. The sources point to about 4 key principles here. First is clarity.
Plain language.
Plain language, yes, but also clearly distinguishing known facts from assumptions, predictions, or areas of uncertainty. Second, honesty.
Being upfront.
Being upfront, admitting limitations, acknowledging errors quickly and transparently if they happen. Third is respect. Recognizing cultural sensitivities, different perspectives within the community, and tailoring the communication approach accordingly.
And fourth.
Responsiveness. It's not just broadcasting information, it's actively listening to concerns raised by the community or stakeholders and demonstrably considering that feedback, adapting plans where it's feasible and sensible.
Can you give an example of how this plays out?
Sure. Take a geotechnical engineer presenting findings about potential landslide risks above a town. Clarity means explaining the probability and potential impact in terms people can understand. Honesty means admitting if the data has gaps or uncertainties. Respect means understanding the fear this might cause and addressing it sensitively. Responsiveness means listening to residents' historical observations about slope stability and incorporating that local knowledge if possible.
And poor communication in that scenario could be just as damaging as a poor technical assessment.
Absolutely. Ethically and potentially legally, failing to communicate risk effectively can be seen as just as bad as failing to manage the risk itself, because you haven't given people the information they need to protect themselves or make informed decisions.
Okay, so we have the duties, the ethics, the broad considerations, the communication. How is this trust actually, verified? What happens when things do go wrong? How is accountability enforced?
Accountability is really the engine that makes self-regulation work. It's the verification mechanism. The system uses specific tools. There are the rigorous standards for getting licensed in the first place.
Right.
Then there are the formal disciplinary systems run by the professional associations, investigations, hearings, sanctions run by peers. And then there's the professional seal or stamp.
The seal. What's the specific significance of that legally?
It's much more than just a signature. When a professional engineer or geoscientist puts their seal on a drawing, a report, a plan, they are making a legal certification.
Certifying what?
They're certifying that, to the best of their knowledge, the work meets all applicable codes, standards, and sound professional practice. And crucially, they are accepting personal, direct, legal liability and responsibility for that specific piece of work.
Personal liability.
Yes. That's the moment the abstract responsibility becomes very concrete and personal. It ties the individual directly to the outcome and its safety.
Wow. Okay, but the real stress test, as you mentioned, must be ethical courage. Those moments where the duty to the public directly clashes with what an employer or client wants.
That's often described as the hardest part of practice. These are the conflict zones. Maybe you're pressured to approve a design that you know cuts corners on safety codes to save money.
Right.
Or you observe an environmental violation on site and you're told by management to just, look the other way. Or maybe you identify a significant error in a senior colleague's calculations, and speaking up could have serious career repercussions.
What does ethical courage demand in those situations?
It demands refusing to compromise that primary duty to the public. It means, first, documenting your concerns, meticulously dates, times, specifics, who you spoke to. It means refusing to sign or seal work you believe is unsafe or unethical.
And if that doesn't work?
Then, if necessary, it involves engaging in responsible whistleblowing. And that typically means reporting the violation through the proper channels, often starting internally, if possible, but escalating to the professional association or even regulatory authorities if warranted, and if internal channels fail or aren't appropriate.
That takes guts.
It absolutely does. But that very act, as difficult as it is for the individual professional, is what ultimately reinforces the credibility of the entire profession's claim to self-regulation. It demonstrates that the system can prioritize public safety over internal pressures or corporate convenience. That's the only way the privilege of self-regulation is maintained long-term.
Which really underlines the role of self-regulation itself. It's not a right, it's a privilege, and it sounds like a pretty fragile one.
It is. It's entirely dependent on the profession's demonstrated ability and willingness to police itself effectively. If the professional community collectively starts to tolerate unethical conduct, or if the association becomes lax in enforcing its standards and disciplining members.
Then the privilege gets questioned.
Exactly. They invite public skepticism, media scrutiny, and ultimately the potential for governments to step back in and impose direct, potentially less nuanced regulation. Sustaining trust requires constant, active self-correction and vigilance from within the profession itself.
Okay, this has been a really thorough deep dive. We basically established that public trust isn't just nice to have, it's the absolute bedrock for engineering and geoscience in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And it's justified and maintained through this combination of consistent technical competence, unwavering ethical integrity, a robust accountability structure.
Right. Accountability that stretches from immediate clients all the way to future generations.
And clear, honest communications, a really comprehensive package of duties.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture for professionals listening, it's crucial to remember that getting your license, your PEing or PGO, that's really just the starting line.
Not the finish line.
Not at all. Earning and maintaining public trust is a continuous, lifelong process. Every single professional decision you make, every interaction, every project, no matter how small it seems, either subtly reinforces or potentially weakens the standing and credibility of the entire profession in the public's eyes.
Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Given that society, through government, has delegated this significant authority to your profession to police itself.
Yeah.
Are you personally, in your daily practice, upholding those standards rigorously enough to truly justify keeping that privilege?
It's a challenging question professionals need to ask themselves constantly. Is my conduct reinforcing the justification for self-regulation?
A powerful point to consider. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the foundations of professional responsibility.
My pleasure.
And remember, if you want to really master these complex concepts, especially if you're aiming to be successful on the NTPE exam, make sure you subscribe to hear more.